to introduce myself. My name is Julia Schmelzer, and I work at General Mills that makes this Basic 4 cereal. And I'm also mother to Lauren, a 5th grader, and Eli, a 2nd grader, and neighbor to Tor in our class today.
And my name's Wade Schmelzer, and I work for actually a company called Cargill that supplies different ingredients that go into products like Basic 4. So we're going to talk to you a little bit today about your IB unit, where we are in place and time, and kind of give you some perspective and some thoughts on how it relates to something like a cereal.
So as you guys have learned just different things about the world and our country and different crops that grow in different regions and all of that, we're going to be asking you questions to help you figure out more how it takes the world to create a box of cereal. So with that, we have Basic 4. Well,
how many of you had this cereal before? A few of you?
All right. So can you tell us? I'll just have you raise your hands if you know the answers. What ingredients are in Basic 4 cereal? And even if you haven't had it, probably from looking at the box, you could guess. So raisins. Raisins. Yes. Flour, like wheat flour or something. Okay. Dried cranberries. Okay. Yes. Almonds. Wade has very neat handwriting and takes them up. Others?
Maybe sugar.
Sugar.
Like, I forgot what they're called, but like those flakes.
Flakes.
Just flakes. Corn. They're corn.
Corn flakes.
Corn flakes.
Anybody else have any other thoughts? Yes. Whole grains. Good job. I'm gonna move us to the next screen.
Sugar.
Yeah, you can see. Yeah, so whole grain wheat, corn, sugar and brown sugar, raisins, rice flour, yep.
Any other things in there that you didn't think were going to be in there? Raise your hand.
Okay, raise your hand if you have a comment.
All right, so I heard honey and salt.
Oh yeah, we get.
Somebody said oil. There's lots of vitamins. Yep. Hold on a second. Oats. Oats is a good one.
I didn't think baking soda was soda.
It has baking soda.
That's up, everybody. Okay, hold on a second. Yes. Corn syrup. Yes, you did one?
Dextrose.
Yes, that's actually like sugar.
Yep.
So corn syrup. We're going to talk about these each in cap, and we can kind of group them together. So, you know, which things are sweet that would go together? So the sweet things would be honey, corn syrup, sugar, cinnamon. Anybody cinnamon? Gives it flavor. It's like a spice.
Yep. And there's also, I'm going to add to the cinnamon pile flavors. There's more flavor in there.
Artificial flavor.
Natural and artificial flavors. And cinnamon.
So how about, so we've got some things underlined here that are sweet things that help to give us flavor. And we also have some things like fruits. So you've got the cranberries and the raisins, and even almonds are things that are in there. How about things that are grains? You know what grains are? Grains. Corn. And one other one that I don't think I heard anybody said was rice. All different types of grain. So we put them in groups, and we're gonna, right? We put them in groups. We're gonna talk a little bit about each of these groups and kind of where they come from. Where they come from, both in the United States, why they come from there, and then also other things come from other parts of the world. So we'll talk a little bit about that and how we get to the point of making a whole box of cereal.
Yep. And you guys are going to help us figure out where things come from based on what you've learned already.
Yeah, you can.
You can all teach us other things. All right, so let's start with the grains. All right, anybody have some ideas about something that's grown here in Minnesota? The red shirt?
Tomatoes.
Tomatoes.
How
How about something from here?
from the grain list?
From our grain list.
Any
Our grain
grains?
list was oats,
That you guys
wheat,
know?
corn, rice.
Oh.
Do you have another thought? You're driving down a road. Wheat. Some places in western Minnesota will grow some wheat. Oats. We can have some oats here too. Corn. So, if we look at the United States, a lot of corn is grown in Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, even some down here. Yeah, kind of this whole section. The middle section of a lot of corn is grown. The Midwest.
You guys, so what kind of weather, what climate is in this area that you think might be good for corn?
Rain.
Rain. And then for the snow when it melts. Right. So that's some cold.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I just think in Minnesota, it looks like it should be a very good year for crops because of the long winter that we had.
Yeah, it'll be late getting them in the field. But have you ever heard the phrase knee high by the 4th of July?
Yes.
Yeah, that used to be an old farmer's phrase about how high the corn would be. But you think about how tall corn really gets, and by the 4th of July, if it's knee high, how much taller does it get? I mean, it'll be, if you walk through a cornfield, it's up over the top of your head.
Yeah.
So it's really, in the summer times, when you're outside playing and you're kind of hot and you're sweaty, it's because it's really humid outside. And that humidity really helps the corn grow well in the Midwest.
I actually have a comment on that I think, like, rain, it's like a lot of those things you grow.
Okay?
In Idaho, I think they grow a lot in Idaho.
Of what?
Like, just everything, like rain, fruit.
So let's talk about some of these other ones. So things like oats. Oats and barley. We don't have barley here, but oats and barley tend to grow really well in actually places that are a little bit cooler. So if we talk, so this is corn. Oats and barley, we tend to actually have a lot of oats and barley grown kind of in this area, even up into Canada. We get a lot of oats in it, and the temperature of that part of the country is actually really good for growing those types of crops.
Rocky Mountains.
Yeah, just in the foothills of the mountains and down a little bit lower. It's important where we plant various things in the country based on what the conditions are like.
So I think rice would be grown more around like Alabama and the area.
Why do you think that?
It just seems like it talks a lot. Books I read talk a lot about rice growing in the south.
Yeah, and where else do you, if you think about the world, where else do you sometimes see a lot of rice grown? Asia, a lot in Asia. That's important. And the conditions. So you think about Asia, and it's on the big world map. If you look at Asia, it's pretty close to the equator. So obviously, the farther south we get here, tends to be a lot of rice grown. And it's really humid and really sticky.
I was thinking even on like Alabama. I was thinking on like
Yeah.
Alabama and Georgia.
Yep, that whole southern part of the country. So we got one left. We got corn, we've got oats, we've got rice. The one we've got left is wheat. Anybody have any thoughts? The blue shirt?
I probably think it would be grown in like maybe North Dakota and South Dakota.
Exactly. North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska.
Lots in Nebraska.
This whole section, there's a lot of wheat. And you can go to some of these places and you could stand out and look at a field and you could see 30 miles and you just see wheat fields going on and on and on because there's no hills.
It's a boring ride.
It's a long drive.
Should we,
Yep, so let's jump ahead.
Yep.
So those are our grains.
I'll go to the grain. Should we go to the grain
Yep,
now?
let's go to
Talk about grain.
So here's various types of grains. This is wheat. Anybody know what that one is? Does anybody have, can you guys see this? Brown sugar. It's not brown sugar, just a second. I'm going to turn this off for a moment. Can you tell what this is? Not? It's a grain.
It's rice.
It's actually the wheat. And do you know what they're doing with it here? Raise your hands.
I think they're like taking the little like pieces out of
the grass?
out of
Wheat
the grass.
berries?
They're taking the wheat.
So it's been harvested. Can you tell what they're putting it into? A ship or a barge. Because a lot of the grains that get grown, especially if you go back to this map, in Minnesota with corn or with wheat, if you look at a map of the United States, you look at rivers. So they actually use the rivers to actually load it onto the barges to go it out. And it's not just to go to different places in the United States, but it's actually just we export or sell a lot of these things to other countries. Because some other countries can't grow some of the things that we can grow here. So that's our grain category. Now we talked about, does it look like a turnip? We talked about some other ingredients here. The sweeteners. So you had sugar and honey and corn syrup. Where do you think corn syrup comes from?
Corn.
Pretty easy. How about honey?
Bees.
Bees. And where do bees get it from?
Flowers.
Right. Raise your hand.
And where do you use sugar? Raise your hand if you have something to say.
Sugar cane.
Sugar cane?
This is sugar cane. And anybody else know? Sugar beet. So if we go back,
There's the sugar beet right there. Oops, sorry.
so it looks like a turnip, but it's actually a sugar beet. So if we go back to here and we talk about sugar cane, for instance, sugar cane really gets grown in places that are in the south, similar to what other product on here? Raise your hands.
Rice.
Similar to the rice. So a lot of sugar cane actually used to be in Florida, Georgia, kind of along the Gulf of Mexico, and then even in here, all the islands in the ocean, or in the Caribbean Sea, there used to be a lot of sugar cane grown here. Sugar cane. The corn syrup is obviously going to be grown where? Midwest, where the corn is. So this will be corn syrup as well. So we're in syrup. And then honey is wherever, what's that?
Flowers.
So you can't really get honey from anywhere in here because you have flowers and other things.
Except for cold places. Except for
Even in Minnesota, you can get honey. And so even though it's cold here, the bees will still produce honey.
Even at the Westwood Nature Center.
Yes.
They make honey there. Do you want to show where sugar beets?
Oh yeah, sugar beets. Anybody have any relatives who are from North Dakota, South Dakota? That's actually really, for sugar beets, this part of the country, there's a lot of sugar beets. places throughout the country where we get these things. But if we look at where you produce something like a cereal, there's going to be lots of different places they produce them throughout the country. Now, when we talked about these different sugarcane and corn syrup, what's one of the ways that you'd actually, before with the grains we had ships that are going to the rivers. What other ways do you think you could move things from one place to another? Trucks. Trucks, you have bags of things. Another?
Planes.
Trains. Or planes, is that what you said? Planes?
Yeah.
Planes with it? Trains. So here they're actually loading corn syrup onto a train.
And trains are probably the least expensive way to move things around. For airplanes, you have to pay for how heavy something is, so that gets to be kind of an expensive way to move things around. Trucks are also, but with the train,
So this is actually a picture of all of the different ways, all the different train tracks that run across the country. So it looks like a big spider web everywhere of where these trains go.
and you can fit how many rail cars can go in a train, one train? About 100 versus 100 different trucks on the roads too. So that's also helpful in keeping the cost down for transportation.
Yeah, and I remember being a kid and going in, I had family that lived in western Kansas, and it is kind of boring because it's pretty flat. But I remember being stopped behind a train that we had to wait for 15 minutes for the train to go by because it was so long. Somebody made a comment about there's not very many in the West. Why do you think there's not very many in the West, train tracks? I think you made it back there, didn't you? Do you have any thoughts on why?
No.
What's here? Do you remember when you studied the U.S.?
Oh, the mountain.
Rocky Mountains.
No. Yeah, so you only have a certain number of places you can actually get from here to here easily over the mountains.
What about the Appalachian Mountains?
Appalachian mountains are a lot shorter.
They're lower, they're older, they've been worn down a little bit more.
Yeah.
So there's only a few places that you can really get efficiently across the mountain.
And also, speaking of that, so with the mountains, as you get up over the hills, the air pressure goes down, and we actually have trouble sometimes with our food products, if it's in a bag and the air pressure goes down and the pressure inside the bag is a little higher, bags can pop. So we've had some like Chex Mix bags that pop open, some of that. So we really do have to pay a lot of attention to the different altitudes and how our products get treated as they go up that way.
What else do we have left up here? So we talked about the grains.
Salt, cinnamon, cranberries, almonds, flowers.
Great.
So let's talk about the cranberries and raisins.
We'll go to the next slide here. So up on the top, you can see, so bees. So we look to the bees for honey, but also when they pollinate the flowers, that's what helps a plant to produce a fruit. So if we have fruit, almonds are actually a fruit, a nut that's inside of a flower still. They're kind of the fruit of that tree. We still need the bees in order to make those ingredients.
Anybody know what this is on the bottom? Right here? Pomegranate.
Cranberry.
Cranberry.
There are a lot in the Northeast. Yeah.
Anywhere else you know? Victoria, raise your hand.
It's upside down.
It's actually water reflecting the sky down there. Cranberries grow in a watery bog area.
So, So Northeast, Massachusetts is a big state that produces cranberries. Anybody else know any states that produce cranberries? New Jersey does. We have some in the Midwest that produce cranberries. Not much in Minnesota, but one of our close states. Wisconsin, central part of Wisconsin, because it's really sandy. is good at growing cranberry. Those are the two major ones, but we produce a lot. Between Wisconsin and Massachusetts and New Jersey, they produce a lot of cranberry. So the other thing that was on there was almonds. Do you know, anybody have any ideas of what state or close to what states we produce almonds?
Is it right back here?
Kind of like, in the southeast, kind of.
Kind of over here, are you thinking?
Southeast can produce, they can produce some pecans especially.
Yeah.
Oh,
Pecans, a lot of pecans in Georgia.
Yep.
Anywhere else, you know, where we get a lot of fruits and vegetables and some nuts, come from one state produces a lot of them. Pretty big state.
Idaho, you're thinking?
Idaho.
California.
California, exactly. A lot in California of almond producers, fruit producers, obviously things like oranges.
I like oranges.
Pistachios, all kinds of nuts. All kinds of nuts. So again, we've got things all over the country. We've got all these things that are all over the country. We can use the trains, we can use ships to get them to different spots in the country. If we're going to produce something, let's say in, we're on your class, we can produce something.
Yeah, I think that's in California.
Yes, I think there's one maybe, they produce that cereal somewhere like here in California and Tennessee. So you've got to use the shipping routes to get things to different parts of the country to make it. Question?
I noticed that when we were looking at the train or foods, they said there are more in America than there were in Mexico and Canada. Do you know why that is?
I think that was more, so your question is,
Yeah, right there.
when we first start, I mean, where do we start off when we became a country?
Their name.
Like on
The Northeast? Yeah, so over here. So we first started becoming a country and then the train slowly came across. And it wasn't until the mid-1800s that you could even get a train across this part of the country. It took a long time, so there's less here because they learned how to build trains here. And then they made them so they could go on efficient routes. But a lot of these other, especially in Mexico, it wasn't as developed until much later. Train. But you see here, there's a lot of trains here because there's a lot of crops grown in the central part of Canada. So they have lots of different train tracks that are running different directions to get the food onto the train and get it where it needs to go. All right. Yeah, we're gonna. No. Yep. So we talked about some of the fruit. Now some of these other things we can't make them in the United States. So we have a couple different things that were in this.
Yeah, so up here, we have, do you guys, who recognizes this? Yeah, cinnamon.
Anybody know where cinnamon comes from? I'm not going to ask you, Tor. But I know you'll know. Do you have a guess?
Asia.
Asia. Do you know what part of the plant is from? If you get fruit, it comes from the flower. You get a piece of fruit. But anybody know where cinnamon comes from?
Bark.
Bark. That's the bark off the tree.
So they'll peel the bark off and then they dry it out like that. Then they cut smaller cuts of it, and then the smaller cuts of bark curl up into cinnamon sticks. So now you guys can say that you've all chewed on tree bark.
And what's the difference though? If you go to a field in Minnesota or North Dakota or Wisconsin or Iowa, what do you see when it's time to harvest? What's out there harvesting? Combines, big vehicles are out there doing it. Look at all the people here. They're out here rolling up the bark to let it dry. There's a lot of manual labor would get another.
People, just individual people.
See, somebody said Asia. A lot of Southeast Asia. Here, this is Vietnam. Has cinnamon. Anybody have an idea what this is down here? Flour. Yeah, vanilla bean.
So vanilla comes from a bean that starts out like green bean, and then it gets dried and kind of fermented into a brown bean that then becomes that they can squeeze and get that vanilla extract
Does it
out of that.
any questions? Yes. What is it? Does it look familiar to you?
Yeah,
Anybody have orchids in the house?
I have a lot
It's actually an orchid plant. And it actually, yeah, it's yep, so those are different. So we're talking about, we're making the cereal somewhere in here, or over in here. And we have a lot of ingredients we can get from here. But something like vanilla or cinnamon has to come from here. So you've got to do on a ship, it's coming over here across the ocean to get your vanilla or your cinnamon over to the United States to use it in making a cereal. Any questions so far?
Why does it have to go that way?
Because it's shorter.
Even though it seems farther away, but really it's a globe, and to go that way, this ocean here is the same as that ocean.
If you went this way, you'd have to go down and around Africa. And if you're coming over here, and go all the way down and around here and up here.
That's long.
That's a lot longer.
Or even up this way.
Or you can do like Scotland.
So. But some companies are very good at knowing how to get things from one place to another the most efficient way. So let's maybe anybody have for your questions?
So I'm pretty sure that there's like this canal going through Egypt, so you can go up through Egypt and then over through.
There are canals. There are canals at different spots here you can take. So, all right. Let's jump forward a little bit. So what else have we talked about? A lot of the different things we've had on here.
Yeah.
What haven't we talked about yet?
Flowers.
Raisins we didn't talk about, but they come from, what do they come from? Grapes. A lot of grapes grown in California. We talked about raisins, we talked about cranberries and almonds, and some of the flowers and things. We haven't talked about salt. We haven't talked about oil. So salt. What's this look like to anybody? Like a cavern, like a cave. This, and look at, turn the light off for a second. What does this look like?
A roll.
A rover, yeah, like a moon rover. That's a big truck, and what they're doing is they're actually getting the salt, scraping out of a cavern. So that's how they actually collect salt. My company actually has a number of salt mines throughout the country that we actually harvest the salt. So you go into a cave and you collect the salt out of there that you use to make salt that you use at your table, in your table shake, your salt shaker.
Do you have a question or a comment?
Questions. Why is the cavern and why is the truck so small?
Because the cavern is that big.
The truck is the normal size.
Oh,
And then
that's not possible.
So yeah. So here's another. So these are caverns, but this looks different. That's outside. There's clouds. So if you look at piling it, this is actually from a solar salt. So you take salt that comes from, where do you think you get solar salt from? What's a place that has a lot of salt? The sun. You use the sun. What's something that has a lot of salt in it?
The ocean.
The ocean.
and the sun helps to dry the water off of the salt.
So if we go back up here, and the ocean. So the salt that we had in the big cavern, we have a salt mine down in Louisiana here, and we have one in Michigan, and somewhere up in here. and another one that's up in New York. And then the solar salt, you gotta be near the ocean. So we actually have San Francisco as somewhere in here, I think.
Yeah, I've been to San Francisco and I think I saw it.
So, yes, and it's right on the ocean, and there's all these little ponds like we saw before where you can actually use the sun to help you produce salt.
Feels like that. Do you have a question?
How does the salt develop in the kingdom?
It was, at one point, the ocean flooded in and deposited a lot of salt underneath in certain spots.
So it's the same way.
Yeah, so it deposited it in there, and then you can go out and you can harvest it in. These go down thousands of feet under the ground to find the salt into these caverns.
And then
And what does salt dissolve in? Water.
Salty water.
Dissolves in water. And that's an issue. You don't want to have your salt mines flood, so you got to keep the water out. Otherwise, all your salt dissolves and you can't collect it anymore.
And then this picture here shows different types of salt crystals that can sometimes even taste a little bit different on your tongue.
All right, so you talked about salts. Anybody have any idea what that may be?
No.
Okay, coconut.
Ooh.
In the front?
Well, go ahead.
The bottom like rice field.
Looks like a rice field, yeah. But we're dealing with trees here. Do anybody know what this is?
Oh. Coconut.
Coconut. It's not coconut, but it looks like a coconut. It's shaped just like it. You have an idea? Is that your guess?
Well, I was gonna say that's a palm tree.
Yeah.
This is a palm. This is a palm nut.
A palm kernel.
So this would be like the outside of the coconut. Sometimes you get coconut, you get the juice inside, and then you get the white flesh. This? Yep. What's that?
Don't you get oil from those?
We can get something here from this part called palm oil.
Or, yeah, palm oil or palm kernel oil.
So, but again, when we, where does it look like we're at here? You said it looks like a rice paddy. Rice field. China. Yeah. So if we go back to our world map, stop. Again, we're down here. A lot in Indonesia, some parts in here, Southeast Asia, growing palm trees to harvest out and get palm kernel oil that we can help in making something like this cereal.
So in the basic for cereal, should I go back to the front? The top slide. So I don't know if you guys can see this very well, but there's this like granola nugget thing that melts in your mouth almost like chocolate.
Broadway? What? Broadway pizzas. You know, like those little candies that they give you after your meal, or
Yes, potentially those candies could also have palm kernel oil in them. And chocolate has like cocoa butter, but palm kernel oil is another type of that oil that is solid at room temperature and it melts in your mouth.
Anybody have any questions at this point about where we get some of these different things? From the world or from the United States?
nuts. Where do they get the palm oil? Are they grown with it, or?
Yeah, it's on the inside. So if you look at this picture, it's on the inside. You actually have to squeeze it out of there.
Oh.
So these will get, it's not like if we talked before about if you had a combine or something to come through and collect all the corn, you've got to pick all of these off these trees. So there might be hundreds of these nuts up on the top, but you've got to pick them down and then collect out the parts you want to squeeze out the oil.
The oil thing, is there a special machine that squeezes out for you?
Yeah, there's special equipment that does all of that.
And make sure it's really clean and make sure it has the right melting point that melts in your mouth nicely.
You have a question?
And then the last part of basic for cereal that's not really part of the cereal at all, but a helpful part of eating the cereal.
Is what?
Milk.
Milk.
Moo milk.
And where? Where in the United States, if we go back to this map? Map where? Wisconsin.
There was a lot of them in California. Wisconsin or California.
Yep. No thoughts.
California is actually ahead of Wisconsin
It
and
is.
cheese.
Anybody else have any other suggestions?
Well, like, pretty much the whole West has a lot of cows.
Yeah.
Any when we get milk here, most of the milk we get from here is from Minnesota or Wisconsin, or the milk, if somebody was going to have basic 4 cereal in California, breed milk from California. Why do you think that is? Why do you think you have to get it from somewhere that's close to you?
It won't spoil those.
Exactly.
Right.
It won't spoil. It doesn't last very long. So we have all those railroads and those the ships that can go from place to place, but you can't. It still takes a number of days to get somewhere. You don't want your milk to spoil on a hot railroad car.
I'm going to drink this. That's why they have
Hold on a second.
It could be.
There are a few things that go on a railroad car, refrigeration, but
Yep, and it's expensive to do that, but you can. It costs a lot of money to keep it cold that long. But then if you look at this last slide, so really around the whole country, there's a lot of different places that have cows that make milk.
so each region has kind of states that are very good at producing milk. So Pennsylvania, New York in the Northeast, Idaho in the mountain areas, Texas in the south, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan in the Midwest, and California in the west. So there's a lot of regional dairy producers.
Any other questions? Yes.
So, thinking about the basic for how you package it, now where does that come from? And do you have places that make the corrugated boxes within the area where the actual manufacturing plant is? You mentioned there was a couple places that
Yes.
make basic for.
Yes, so we do have different suppliers that are positioned kind of close to several of our manufacturing locations. So we would get the corrugated cardboard, the cardboard that makes the, that outside of the box, and then those boxes, like 12 of them go inside a bigger cardboard box. So that's that, and then the film, the little pouch that's inside, also gets made oftentimes close by. So we have a lot of different packaging suppliers as well that bring that.
But that film, that's sometimes hard to open when you open the box. Do you know what that's made from? Plastic. Where's plastic come from?
Oil.
Oil. Yeah, most of the plastic comes from oil. There are some places that use other means to make plastic. My company actually has a business that makes plastic that is biodegradable, because usually plastic will last a long time in the ground. So they can make it from things like, what do we grow here? We talked about corn.
Yeah.
From corn. We've actually learned how to make corn or plastic from corn.
What was that?
I was thinking about how to make the plastic out of corn. Maybe out of the corn husk.
It's actually from the corn kernels itself. But you can use the husks for other things like energy, making fuel. There's lots of people who are trying to understand how to use those other parts of the corn that we don't eat or use. Can we use them to come up with some other innovation or new way to use it for things that maybe be thrown away? Just how we deal with recycling and other things, but trying to come up with other parts even from the field that we can use in a different way to be useful for people.
So there are two ways that I know how to get oil. So from like dinosaurs,
Fossil fuels?
yeah, fossil fuels, and then I'm pretty sure you can get it from sunflowers.
Yeah, so there's a number of plants we can use. So we talked about this map. Sunflowers are very, and canola are very prevalent here. Corn, you can actually get oil from corn. You don't think of it when you eat it. It doesn't feel like oil would feel, but it does have oil in it.
There are a lot of seeds. A lot of seeds have oil in there. So if you look in your packaging and the ingredient list, there's sunflower seeds and cotton seeds and safflower and a bunch of different
Even nuts,
seeds.
you can get oil from different types of nuts as well.
Now, I know you were talking about where Basic 4 is made, but when I think about if you travel to another part of the world, do you have manufacturing plants, or do you actually ship the product over to like Europe or?
Both.
Okay.
Both things. So we do have some production plants globally that are making different things, and sometimes they make different products because the people in those areas like to eat different things. Like in Japan, we have Haagen-Dazs ice cream, but they have a green tea flavor that we wouldn't eat here, but they love there. And then cereal is the same way, that where there's some Nestle, we have a partnership with Nestle, and there's some Nestle cereals in Europe. And then Nature Valley granola bars get made in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then they have some more just down in Argentina recently. So as we develop those markets, then they get sent or they get made there. And then they get made with sometimes their local crops and their local rules, and some of that too, which gets to be tricky sometimes for doing product development. You want to make sure that it's good tasting everywhere, so using those ingredients.
Anybody else have any other questions? Thank you for participating today, everybody.
And we have, we'll let your teachers hand out some samples of Basic 4 cereal for those of you who have never tried it before. You can try it today.
You know if people have any allergies.
Yeah, we have some nut allergies and yeah.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, or if you want to take it with you, I mean, we're gonna go do snack